Equalization, EQ, was usually a pretty simple affair back in the 50s and 60s. Console EQs are often little more than broad bass and treble controls, with the occasional mid-range adjustment, like you saw with the red consoles, if you've already gone through those videos. This was especially true at Abbey Road, where the recording philosophy leaned toward fidelity to the original source with minimal processing. But one area where there was more of a need for specific EQ adjustments was mastering. Remember, at that time, mastering was all about prepping the audio for cutting a vinyl master, which was a fairly unforgiving technical process. And it was for that application that the RS56 EQ was originally introduced. The original Universal Tone Control Type RS56, as it was called, was initially mono, and then, as stereo recordings were gradually becoming the standard, the stereo version, the RS56S, was added. In either case, it was a 3-band EQ with 4 different options for center frequency and 6 choices for bandwidth for each band. The real unit had only plus or minus 10 dB of boost and cut per band in 2 dB increments. Wave's version is pretty true to the original spec, but this was one thing that Waves changed, increasing that range to a continuously variable plus or minus 20 dB. It makes sense. In its day, the RS56 would have been used on acoustic instruments, voices, and mixes, which usually don't require all that much boost or cut, especially in mastering, its original intended application. But nowadays, with electric instruments, synths, highly processed drum sounds, a wider range is often called for. And while incremental boost and cut is a common feature of mastering EQs, it allows for more reliable repeatability. Waves wisely assumes the RS56 plugin will be used on individual tracks where continuous adjustment is needed. Technically, the RS56 was a passive EQ. That means, basically, that it could only attenuate or cut signal level. There's no gain available for actually boosting signal voltage. The real RS56 didn't even have a power cord. It accomplished the EQ adjustments by filtering, with capacitors and inductors, for a clear sound quality. And yet, there are both cut and boost controls. When you dial up a boost at a certain frequency on a real passive EQ like this, what's actually happening is that you're attenuating everything else. So if you were to boost, say, 10K and above, you'd really be cutting everything below 10K. Then the overall signal level is restored with makeup gain, just like with a compressor. The hardware RS56 didn't even include the makeup gain. Abbey Road's engineers would have to run the EQ output through an external V72 amplifier, like the ones in the red consoles, for makeup gain. Naturally, the Waves version doesn't go so far as to imitate this. That would be too inconvenient for modern applications. It applies boost and cut as you'd expect, as you're used to from modern EQs, even though they do include a gain control at the output, like most EQs do. Many of you might be familiar with the idea of passive EQs. Another passive EQ model, the Pultec EQP1A, was a contemporary of the RS56 and is widely recreated today in both hardware and software. The original Pultec did have the makeup gain on board, however, and didn't offer quite as much flexibility as the RS56. Originally, in line with Abbey Road minimalist processing philosophy, the RS56 was restricted to mastering applications, particularly tasks like matching the overall tonality of outside recordings. But in the mid-late 60s, the Beatles engineers got a hold of it and began using it more creatively on original recordings and mixes. Previously, given the limited EQ options on the red consoles, they'd gone so far as running signals through multiple channels in series to get the amount of EQ they deemed necessary, so for them, getting a hold of an RS56 must have been like Christmas morning. The RS56 was dubbed the curve bender for its ability to make much more radical adjustments to tone than anything that came before. Waves' version of the RS56 comes in mono and stereo versions, naturally, and the stereo version can be run with the channels linked in stereo mode, individually adjustable in duo mode, or in MS mode. The original stereo RS56S had to resort to an ingenious mechanical linkage where moving one channel's knob physically moved the others as well, but the plug-in version simply works as expected in all these modes. Next up, I'll go through all the controls and operation in detail, and then we can take a listen to the RS56 in action.